It's election time, and across the country, early voting has broken and shattered records. The American people are saying that they want their voices heard. Even the social media giants have gotten into the political process, but some worry that their vote may not count. Voter suppression, misinformation, voter intimidation, and yes, the U.S. Supreme Court. What will happen on election night? Have you cast your vote? And will the U.S. Supreme Court decide the election again? This is State of the Water, and I'm your host, award-winning Dr. Eric Claville, and we want to hear from you as we discuss and inform the public about these and other important issues on our Get Out the Vote radio show. 757-823-9110. 757-823-9110. We want to hear from you. Hampton Roads, it's 2020. We've been talking about the election for over a year now. Right now, we only have 2 days left until we elect the next president of these United States. It seems like eternity since we've had President Barack Obama in office, and we've had 4 years of President Donald J. Trump. From 2016 to 2020, the country has gone through so many dramatic changes. We've gone through a time period where we've seen the rise of white supremacy once again take the lead story in every single headline, just about in every state. We've also seen another pandemic that's hit our country, but this time it's been allowed to spread. We've seen individuals engage in misinformation across the airways. And it's to the point where we don't know, for the most part, who to trust. But this is an opportunity for you to get out there and cast your vote. Now, as I said before in the beginning of the show, early voting, absentee voting, mail-in voting, they have literally shattered records. In some states, there's been as much early voting as there's been individuals that cast ballots in the last presidential election. To me, that shows that democracy is working. To me, that shows there are a lot of people out there that are engaged in the political process. To me, that shows that there are a lot of people that's saying, hey, I want my voice to be heard, even if it's just that one vote to push a candidate over that 270 mark. And if you don't vote, we know in 2016, it'll cause that candidate not to get that 270 vote, electoral college vote. So we want to hear from you. Have you cast your ballot? Have you engaged in absentee voting? Did you go early vote, or are you waiting on election day? 757-823-9110. Well, I can tell you for myself, my wife and I, we cast our vote early. We walked up, we went inside, and we hit the button, and we actually bumping in the button, and we put our ballot to be counted. So we know that our vote's going to count. But there are some people that are out there that believe that their vote may not count. And this is what we call voter suppression. There are different types of voter suppression. There's misinformation. There's actually taking a ballot and throwing it away. And there's voter intimidation at the polls and the like. We're going to talk about all three today and what's taken place so far in our country. But not only that, we're also going to talk about the U.S. Supreme Court and the decisions that they've made so far, the rulings that they've made as it relates to absentee ballots. Now, this is going to be key, and I want us to really understand how important these Supreme Court rulings are going to be. And then we'll talk about the Platinum Plan and Contract with Black America. Do you agree with the rappers Ice Cube and Lil Wayne and the things that they've done to engage the President of the United States? Do you think that they've taken away a few votes from Joe Biden? Or do you think that every vote that every candidate runs for, every office they run for, do you believe that they need to actually win that vote? Or should the votes be guaranteed? just because you're black, or just because you're white, just because you're a male, just because you're a female, just because you're wealthy, you're in one tax bracket or the other. Do they need to work for your vote? So let's take a look at what has taken place in the last several months. Let's start with the post office. The post office itself, we know that there's been hearings on Capitol Hill. There's been reports coming out where the president himself, coming from the White House, sent policies and directives down to the post office to intentionally slow down the sorting of post office mail. Now, I don't know about you, but I think we have one of the best systems in the world for delivering mail and packages. Think about it. You take a stamp, you put it on a letter, or you put it on a package, and you can literally send that package across the world. And in some days, it will get there. I remember being in the military, those letters, I depended upon those letters coming in every week from my family and friends to encourage me through basic training and the like. I mean, we've got a great system. Now, again, is it perfect? Absolutely not, but we've got a great system. But we have a president that says, hey, we want to slow it down even more so. And for what reason? Only one reason that we can ascertain logically is to slow down the processing of absentee ballots. So the question becomes, who benefits from absentee ballots being sent in early? Well, stats show that the Democratic candidate, Joe Biden, for president, has benefited more so from absentee ballots. And not only that, but those who want to avoid the pandemic, which was also exacerbated by the ignoring of White House policy and misinformation. We'll talk about that later. But that's also a part of voter suppression. I'm telling you, there's been a lot going on. So I want us to delve into it and really dig below the layers to understand how this is going to affect the outcome of the election. So we have the post office slowing down the processing of mail. We have the disassembling of very expensive sorting machines that are meant to sort these absentee ballots. So all of this is going to have to be done by hand. We have mail that's being left on the floor of different post offices, not being carried out, and mail not being sorted and being late. So that means that these absentee ballots, if they make it to their destination, may not make it in time. So where's the accountability there? What is Congress doing about that? What are elected officials? What do they have to say about it? Is there anything that we can do within the post office? What about the Office of Inspector General for the post office? Can we hold these individuals accountable? Well, we'll see what the outcome is on Election Day. Well, let's also take a look at voter intimidation before we get to the Supreme Court in these ballots. I want to take a look at voter intimidation. Just a few days ago, the Biden campaign was on a caravan, their bus, going through Texas. And Trump supporters literally surrounded this bus. And they could not stop at their rally. So they had to go through. They couldn't stop and galvanize voters to go to the polls. I don't know about you, but this is voter intimidation 101. I have no idea where the police were. I have no idea where the law enforcement was at that time. But obviously they weren't really protecting that particular bus, or maybe the campaign made an effort to say, no, we're not going to engage in this type of engagement with the Trump supporters. So we're not going to stop. Whatever the case may be, that's voter intimidation. And after all, we saw it right here in the Commonwealth of Virginia when early voting started. We saw it in Fairfax County, where you have individuals going inside the polls to vote, to engage in their right to vote, constitutional right to vote, their civic engagement, and you have Trump supporters that are yelling, that are screaming. Now, again, they were 100 yards away, 100 feet away from the polls. From what we understand, they didn't have any weapons there because it was in the governmental area. But at the same time, if you have a lot of people, a lot of individuals who are afraid, that are saying, that are yelling at you over and over again, that's intimidation. And you ask yourself again, where was the law enforcement? Where were those individuals sent to help protect and ensure that intimidation by any means will not cause individuals not to engage in their constitutional right to vote? I don't know. But we still have the greatest democracy in the world. It's tenuous, but at the same time, we've got to protect it. So we've got the post office. We've got voter intimidation. And I remember on Saturdays, my son and I were driving from these golf tournaments that he plays in, and he's like, Dad, did you see all of those cars with these flags on it and these Trump signs? The first weekend, I was like, well, I didn't really see it, but, I'm concentrating on something else. But the next weekend, it happened again, and I saw it. And more. So I started taking a look and see what was going on around the country. And it shows that these Trump caravans are assembling every weekend, and they're holding these quote-unquote parades. That's what I'm going to call it. It's a caravan of cars that are going down and saying, this is our candidate that we're voting for. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. As a matter of fact, you should go out. You should put your signs. You should do it in a respectful way. Campaign for your candidate of choice. You can do that. Our American system allows it. But that shows me that there are people that are out there that love what this president is doing, love the policies that are coming down the pipe, love the way that he's talking. They love how he's handling the country. They love how he's handling foreign policy and diplomacy. And they want to put him back in office for 4 more years. Now, we'll do another show on the policies in the United States the last 4 years. And we'll see if that's a really good idea. And we'll do a compare and contrast as well. But we can see it right here in our own land, the immigration policies, separating children from their parents. Over 500 children, we can't find their parents to this day. These are children. We put these individuals in cages, scared them, and then send them back to their country. That's the America that some people want to see. That's the America that some people support. The question is, do you? And if not, what are you going to do in order to make your voice heard? What are you going to do? 757-823-9110. 757-823-9110. It's our Get Out the Vote radio show. Have you cast your vote for the election? If you haven't cast your vote, do you plan to vote on Election Day? And what are the issues that are important to you? Right now, we're talking about whether the voting suppression efforts by some on the right, through the post office, through governmental policies, White House policies, executive orders that are coming down. We're talking about voter intimidation at the polls, voter intimidation and rallies, and whether this is a good thing for America or not. So what America do you want to see? What America do you want to ensure that we see 2021? Give us 1 second. We have a caller. Caller, you're on the air. This is State of the Water. What's on your mind? Caller, you're on the air.
Hi. So I completely disagree with Trump's entire term. I mean, he did so many things that were hurtful to so many different people. He made so many blunt disrespectful statements that were just horrible. I mean, he had no respect, no regard for anyone, their children, their family, their livelihoods. I disagree with him completely. Now, granted, I don't feel that Biden is the best candidate. However, he's the only other candidate that we have at this moment. So I personally will be voting for Biden. I've also requested my absentee ballot, but I will go ahead and turn that in person. I'm not, I'm not intimidated by anyone's choice or, how they're trying to put Trump on people. But, I stand for what I believe, and he's a horrible president. He's a horrible person, and I will not be voting for him again.
Now, thank you so much, caller, for, first of all, engaging in the political process. Thank you for exercising your right to vote in our great democracy. Tell me the reason why you're wanting to vote in person as opposed to not absentee.
No, I said I'm going to turn it in person.
Okay,
So,
good.
yeah, there's been a lot of issues with people are trying to mail them in, just a bunch of things that I'm a little uncertain about. So I actually do have the absentee ballot, but I am going to physically turn it in, at the location. But I will definitely be voting this year, as I did 4 years ago.
Caller, can you tell us what is the most important issue or issues for you for the next president in 2021 that you would like to see addressed?
Honestly, I would like him to make a change. Like, I keep hearing America, make America great again. America was not great, and all he did was tear it down even further. So for this next president, Biden, I do expect him to make a lot of changes, to kind of go back and redo and revamp a lot of the decisions that Trump made, a lot of the politics that, that went on, a lot of the bills that were signed, a lot of things that he did I just do not agree with. And I feel like for the next president, he's going to have to go back and redo a lot of things. He's going to have to undo some things and kind of make it better, tweak it a little bit if possible. But I do want him to go back and make some changes, definitely.
Caller, thank you so much for calling in on Stay in the Water.
Thank you. Have a good day.
So there are people that are out there. The caller just stated that the president needs to go, that this has been a terrible 4 years for our country, the policies that he's articulated, and she's going in to drop off her absentee ballot. So there are many people that are going in to vote and to turn in their absentee ballot or to vote on election day or have voted early because of going back to that issue of the Postal Service, right? Trying to suppress the vote. But it's not just the Postal Service. It's just not voter intimidation, but also through the Supreme Court itself. Now, I don't know how many of you are old enough to remember or actually remember 2000, Bush v. Gore, and the hanging chad of the state of Florida, and how we did not have a president for several weeks until the U.S. Supreme Court decided the election on a plurality decision. Now, that plurality decision means that it wasn't a majority 5-4, but it was less than 5 that voted for that decision in order to give the election over to, at the time, George Bush, who then, of course, served 2 terms. And if you remember, right after that, 9/11 took place in 2001. And then right after that, we went into Iraq for weapons of mass destruction. And now we've been in Iraq and the Middle East for the last 18 plus years over that. Would our country have been different if the Supreme Court would have ruled in the favor of Gore? Would our country have been different if they would have allowed those votes to actually count in Florida, to go through that process? Well, we don't know. But what we do know is that the U.S. Supreme Court is still making these rulings as it relates to the election. So let's take a look at the election rulings so far as it relates to 2020. On October 20th in Pennsylvania, here it looks like the Republicans lost a swing battle state decision when a state Supreme Court ruled that mail ballots could be received 3 days past the election day. So that means after the Postal Service said delivery days risk disenfranchisement from the state, this extension was allowed. Now, what will happen if they come from the federal government? What will happen if these ballots come in after that date? Well, according to the ruling by the state Supreme Court, it's only 3 days past election. Let's look at Alabama. October 22nd, statewide ban on curbside voting, in which disabled folks could drive up to a polling place and drop off their ballots. This was allowed to stand. Can you believe that? It was allowed to stand. October 26th, Wisconsin. The Supreme Court declined to extend the deadline for counting of mail-in votes in Wisconsin. Now, this was a major victory for the Republicans who actually brought the legal challenge. So that simply means that the extension for mail-in ballots, they simply, if they come in after that time period, they won't count. Pennsylvania. Now, keep in mind, any candidate that wins the election must win Pennsylvania. They've got to win Pennsylvania. They've got to win Florida. If Florida's back in the election again, we'll talk about that in a second. But I want you to see the gravity of all of these decisions, little by little. The U.S. Supreme Court on October 28 declined a Republican request to expedite a review of Pennsylvania's mail-in ballot deadlines. So this was a win for the Democrats. But in North Carolina, October 29, Democrats won a similar case a few days later in a 5-3 decision in which Chief Justice Roberts, joining more of the liberal justices on the bench, saying that they can count ballots up to 9 days after the election. 9 days after the election. Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, North Carolina. These are all battleground states. If you're going to win the election, you got to win those states, right? And we haven't talked about Florida. We'll talk about Florida in just a moment. But we're talking about attempts at voter suppression. The U.S. Supreme Court, they're making rulings again that are affecting when your ballots actually are counted. So as the caller stated, she was afraid or had some trepidation, I'll say that, trepidation on whether her ballot would actually count. So she's going to drop it off the day of. This is something that a lot of persons have trepidation about. And based on these Supreme Court rulings, based upon the policies of the post office, based upon reports and charges against postal workers and others, throwing away absentee ballots, throwing away ballots that are already completed, filled out, vandalizing ballot drop-off boxes, your trepidation is justified. But moving forward, what are we going to do to protect our vote? What are we going to do to protect our democracy? These are all questions that we've got to answer. But right now, we've got to go out and we've got to cast our vote. 757-823-9110. 757-823-9110. Have you cast your vote? And if you have, how did you cast your vote? Did you go into the polling place to actually fill in your ballot and have it processed right in front of your eyes? Did you mail in your ballot? Do you have an absentee ballot? Or are you voting election day? We want to hear from you. 757-823-9110. But also, let's look at misinformation. Now, we know in 2016, FBI reports showed that Russia had interfered in our elections, hands down. And just recently, just a year ago, and 1 month ago, reports came as early stating that Russia again is going to interfere in our election. But we haven't done anything to thwart their attacks. Now, again, this is something that is coming directly from the White House itself. So what is going to happen, not just on Election Day, but what's happening now? Let's take a look at misinformation in 2020. So not only did Russia interfere in the election in 2016, FBI reports show that they're interfering again, and they're doing it through social media. But the social media giants have been more vigilant because Congress have called them and pulled them into committee hearings to testify about this. They held them accountable. But not just that, but they've also jumped into the fray of the political process by helping individuals engage in early voting, registering their vote. Just this past week, Mark Zuckerberg testified in Congress that Facebook, by a conservative number, have helped to register and help persons learn where they could cast their vote. Over 4 million individuals they've helped to register to vote and help through the voting process. 4 million. Now, for those of you who are on social media all the time, and social media is a way of life now, we can't operate without it. Just like the internet, we can't operate without the internet. It is a way of life. How many of you actually saw those advertisements about the election? I can tell you now, on Facebook, that's the first thing that pops up. If I'm on YouTube, I see a commercial, an advertisement that says, hey, this is where you should go vote. Also, I see candidates and individuals that are supporting their candidates give advertisements over these information giants. How has it affected you? Did you find out how to vote? Did you learn when the deadlines were? Did you register to vote because of social media, because of Facebook, because of Google, because of YouTube, because of Twitter? We want to hear from you. Did this help you? Now, anytime we can register new voters, that's a good thing. That tells us that the people are actually listening. That tells us that the people want to be engaged. But I will take a quick pause and talk about my surprise of how many individuals who are adults that said this is the first time they're voting. You know, Shaquille O'Neal, was interviewed. He said, this is my first election I'm voting in. And you begin to scratch your head and say, you mean you didn't vote for the first black president or the re-election of the first black president, or you didn't vote, during the time of the Clinton era? Again, I kind of scratched my head on that. You have individuals with, of course, fame, popularity, access, wealth, education, but this is the first time that they're voting. Now, again, it's a good thing that you're engaging in the political process and your civic duty. But where are we missing the mark? Where are we missing the mark? So all these good things the individuals are telling us that we should do in society and engage in our civic duty, but you're not voting yourself, caused me to scratch my head on that one. But I digress. 757-823-9110. 757-823-9110. We want to hear from you on our Get Out the Vote radio show here on Stay in the Water. But let's go back to the misinformation campaign. So we know our president, no one, now this is not a negative to him, or this is just the truth, but he doesn't tell the truth all the time, right? He flat out lies. His party admits he lies. Individuals working in administration say he lies. He just lies. He does it all the time. But there are people that believe it. There are people that believe it. And this causes a churn of misinformation. This causes a tidal wave of actions and emotions geared toward this misinformation. This is very dangerous because you get groups like QA9 who are out there that are galvanizing around these, some conspiracy theories, some lies, And some, maybe a little fact here, but it's being twisted and turned to a point where you don't remember the truth anymore. How dangerous is this to our democracy? How dangerous are these things to our society? And how can we learn the truth? So there are a lot of things out there on the internet, a lot of things. I remember years ago, one of my youngest nieces, we were talking about Barack Obama, and this was before he was running. This is when he was running for president. And she said, well, he's a Muslim, isn't he? I said, no, he's not a Muslim. He's actually a Christian. He goes to, Christian church over there in Chicago, South Side. I said, well, why do you think he's a Muslim? She said, well, it's on the internet. Now, again, she was under 10 years old, and these are just things that, kids say, right? Kids say they're doing these things. But not just kids, but adults believe these things without checking it out. But even as a child, she had the wherewithal to confirm it with an adult that she trusted, her uncle. But how many of us are actually doing that? Based upon a lot of comments that I see online, based upon the movement of QA9, based upon the movement of other individuals following these highly emotionally charged and negative and hate-mongering messages. Not a lot. Is this going to fill the void of Rush Limbaugh when he eventually leaves the air? He did announce that he has advanced stage cancer, and his treatment is not doing as well as the doctors wanted it to be. So, again, we don't wish death upon anyone or sickness or illness. But the fact of the matter is, we're all going to leave here one day. And unfortunately, he has a sickness that may speed up his time here with us on this earth. But when he eventually leaves, whether he retires or whatever the case may be, will these conspiracy theories, will these online social media messages, will they fill the void of the Rush Limbaughs to galvanize hate, to galvanize emotional responses that are negative toward individuals? Will this be the case? If it is, I tell you, you gotta wait till Rush Limbaugh comes on, right, to listen to him, to those 3, 4 hours. But of ranting and raving. But with social media, all you have to do is click and it goes. And you can't bring it back, because once you click, it's out there and it takes on a life for their own. But this is the misinformation that's dangerous for our democracy. I'll tell you that. But our president has been able to master this. He's been able to utilize Twitter, right? And one question to the Twitter CEO was, how come you haven't been able to police the president of the United States on things that are absolutely false? I know we have freedom of speech, but there's a responsibility with freedom of speech. I mean, Supreme Court rule, you can't yell fire in a crowded theater, and you'll cause individuals to have accidents, trample each other, and the like. You can't incite riots or hate speech. But for some reason, you're able to print things that are absolutely false, and people believe it. But that's got to change. The question is, how far do we go? Is that a slippery slope with freedom of speech? Is the personal responsibility on the person that's reading it and that's viewing it? We've had this discussion with video games and the violence in video games. We've had this discussion, with various shows that we see on television or movies that are made. So this is a conversation that's not new, but it's a conversation that evolves with the different technologies and the way that we digest and information, we create information, and for what reason. So voter intimidation, voter suppression, and misinformation, all of these are meant to do one thing, and that's to dilute the vote. One thing only, to dilute the vote. But keep in mind, as African Americans, voter intimidation and voter suppression is not new to us. I mean, no more is it the grandfather clause. No more is it the poll tax. No more is it the literacy test. And no more is it just outright killing and lynching because you want to vote. But now it's a flood of information and causing you to almost drown in it and causes you to sift through it as you go throughout your day, as if our lives aren't filled with enough that we have to now take a class and digest and research every single thing that we read. So who are those news outlets that we can trust? That's something that we have to figure out. We have to figure out after this election, but we've got to figure it out. Now, as we talk about these election laws and the rulings that we have, whether it be faithless electors, which the Supreme Court has ruled on, or whether it be when absentee votes can be counted and when they're postmarked and the like, and whether we'll actually engage in voting over online. There are some states that do that. Will we be safe? Will your vote actually count? These are all things that we got to figure out to protect our democracy. Because one thing that sets us apart from all other countries is that as a citizen, you have the right to not only question your elected official through the administrative process of council meetings, or you can write, you can call, you can actually attend committee hearings and the like, but you also have the right to vote for the person that you want to elect you, to represent you. You get a chance to say, I want this person to speak for my causes, to speak for the things that I believe that are important to me and my family. To me, that's one of the greatest things about our country. There are many great things about it, but that's one of the absolute greatest, to be able to speak our minds. But should we be committed just because of the neighborhood we come from, our gender, our income bracket, our ethnicity, to one candidate? This was an issue that has come up again more recently with the current engagement of African-American rappers and hip-hop stars that have engaged the current president regarding issues in the black community. More specifically, I'm talking about Ice Cube and Contract for Black America and Lil Wayne and his endorsement of the Platinum Plan of President Trump for African Americans. Now, for those of you who don't know who Ice Cube is, Ice Cube is one of the original members of NWA. He also had solo albums along the way. And as my kids know him, as a movie star with various movies involving children, and Are We There Yet? And also Barbershop. And hopefully I can say those movies on air. But he actually is a businessman as well. He's got the big three. He's has some other successful ventures that he's engaged in. But he started this contract with Black America, right? And this contract with Black America was something that he felt was needed in order to address the issues that were happening in our community. Now, he recently, online, and people went after him saying that he's damaging Joe Biden's chances of winning by talking with the president and the like. And he went on CNN and did an interview. And he said, look, the information is wrong. He said, I reached out to both candidates. The Biden campaign said, we'll talk after the election. Trump said, we'll talk now. And he is the president. He is the one that can sign laws. He's the one that can sign executive orders. He's the one that can give a directive to agencies to make changes. As a matter of fact, there are several African Americans to this day who have been either let out of jail or given a full pardon by the stroke of the pen by a president that we have in office. Their lives were changed simply by having a conversation with the man that's in power. So was Ice Cube wrong for talking with the current president of the United States? As a matter of fact, he said, listen, he's working with whoever is in power, whoever has the power to change the narrative of Black America, to stamp out systematic racism. That's who he's going to work with. Now, some people say, well, you could have done it, after the election. You could have done it later as opposed to doing it now because it's going to shave off votes that Joe Biden could have won. Well, some say Joe Biden should have talked with him to actually engage him and find out what was going on. I mean, he talked with Charlamagne from the Breakfast Club. He talked with Cardi B. But for some reason, he didn't want to talk with Ice Cube about stamping out systematic racism in our communities and investing in our communities. Now, when asked, is he looking to endorse the president? He said no. That's not what he's looking to do. But what he's looking to do is actually engage the president about these issues in our community. Now, let's be honest. Since the height of the civil rights movement, which we saw African Americans, college students, and young and old march in solidarity, work in a systematic way to tear down institutions and laws that disadvantage and just outright discriminate against Black people, where we saw Black men in suits and ties marching, dressed to the nine, our women dressed to the nine, dressed to the T, saying that we want our respect. We want to be able to engage in the American dream. Since the height of that, where we had Black doctors, Black lawyers, Black businessmen, Black insurance companies, Black funeral homes, owners of Black stores, Black cleaners in our communities. From that time to now, we've seen a full 180 of a lot of our communities. Poverty-stricken, drug-infested. The family rate percentage has gone down. I remember a time where if you didn't have a mom and dad, that was rare. But now, according to the statistics, only 1/3 of African Americans born into this world can say, I have a mother and father who are married. Now, maybe it's the change of the times, but the statistics show, evidence shows, history shows that when you have a balanced home, when you have a home where there's a mother and father there to help take care of the children, help to rear the children, your community's stronger, the family's stronger, and ultimately the children have a better advantage to get out into the world and do great things. Education, the whole nine, and reproduce that. But since that heyday, the lack of investment in Black community has gone down. So who's talking? Who's talking to the African American leaders? Who's engaging the Black community outside of Election Day? These are the things that Ice Cube wanted to talk about. These are the issues that a lot of African Americans who are not, quote unquote, wealthy, that don't have access, don't have fame, want to talk about because we're living in those communities. So was Ice Cube wrong? Do you feel the way that he feels? Do you believe that there should be a contract with Black America to not just give rights in laws on paper, but to actually bring in real change? Because in America, capitalism and the dollar speaks louder. 757-823-9110. 757-823-9110. We want to hear from you on our Get Out the Vote radio show. In 2 days, we'll elect the next president of the United States. In 2 days, millions of people will go to the polls to make sure that their vote is counted. And even before then, millions and millions of people have voted already. Who did you vote for? Have you cast your vote? Are you waiting till Election Day? Or do you not want to vote? Call in 757-823-9110. But we're talking about the contract with Black America. How do you feel about your community? How do you feel about politicians that are coming to your community just around election time? Or are they actually there before? So we have a caller. Caller, you're on the air. This is Stay in the Water. What's on your mind?
Good afternoon. I was calling, responding to your statement earlier about Ice-T and Lil Wayne.
Yes, sir.
As far as the voting, in my opinion, you don't need to be listening to anyone like that. You have your own mind. You should be able to read and understand this thing on your own. His opinion, Donald Trump has already made it plain, the writing's on the wall. He doesn't like black people. And if he gets 4 more years in office, he will put a rope around your neck and let you. That's a fact. And that's my statement, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for calling.
You're welcome.
Well, the caller says you should listen to people like this. But we have another caller on the line. Caller, you're on Stay in the Water. What's on your mind? Caller?
Hello?
Yes, caller, you're on air.
Yeah, I couldn't vote. I went down there to vote. First, they told me that I had to be registered, which I told them I voted before, so why do I have to register again? Then they turned me around and said because my address, because I moved, that I wouldn't be able to vote this election.
Now, when you say you went down there, or which city are you voting in, ma'am?
Hampton.
Okay. And when you went down there, you went to the registrars of voters?
Yeah, I went down there to vote, and then they said that they couldn't find me in the system. It took them forever to find me in the system. I said they should have me in the system because I voted before, and last year. And then they turned me around and said, well, because I moved and my address, I just moved in, I can't vote until next year. So
wow,
I just gave up. But They should, I feel like they broadcast for everybody to vote. They should broadcast for people in that situation like that because I'm young. I don't know about that. I just know to go and vote. So I think that's very important for them to say, hey, make sure your address or whatever the case may be down the list so that we don't get turned away.
Right. Now, you bring up a very, very important point. Do you mind telling us your age?
33.
33. Do you engage in social media?
Not really that much.
Okay.
No.
Because I wanted to ask you if you saw any advertisements for voting and register to vote and on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube.
I saw where people were saying to register to vote, but I knew I was already registered. And I went down there, and then that's when I found out where they said that I couldn't vote because I had moved.
Wow. Well, ma'am, I'm so sorry that you missed the deadline to register to vote, and so sorry that you didn't know about the that particular part of voting, meaning when you move you have to re-register. But did you register while you were down there?
I just, I was so upset. I had just ended up leaving. I just said, you know what, whatever.
And could I ask, if you would have voted, who would have you voted for?
That was a good question because all the way up to when I went there, I was trying to decide because I keep hearing different stuff. And I hear that Trump is doing a lot of things for the black people behind the scenes, but he's not addressing all of this stuff that's going on with racism the right way. Then you got this other guy, so it's like I don't know, it's confusing.
Wow.
Then they're saying that Biden is for pedophilia. So it's like, who do you really vote for?
Right. Well, ma'am, I thank you so much for calling because your information is exactly what we're talking about today. Getting the right information and not misinformation. But we want you to register to vote because we've got a big gubernatorial election next year in 2021 and, of course, a presidential election again in 2024. So we look forward to you registering to vote, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for calling. We're callers. You heard it. I mean, listeners, you heard it. We have someone of age that's getting all of this information, and it's hard for them to process it. So this is misinformation at its finest. This is it. It caused an individual, first of all, not to really know who they were voting for while they were going to the poll to go vote. And secondly, unfortunately, this individual who wanted to engage in the democratic process was not able to do so because she missed the registration time period by a few days. In her area, she could have registered to vote up to October 15th, but she missed it by a few days. I don't know the exact day, but between October 15th and November 1st is 15 days, 10 working days. She missed it by just that much because she didn't know, even though she's voted before. So these are all issues that we literally just talked about, and we see the effect of it right now. These election policies, these election laws, we've got to sit down. We've got to take a look at what's working and what's not. And we've got to come to a universal election law, either in our state or should we have one in the country? Should Election Day be a national holiday? Should we engage in online voting? Should every person automatically be registered to vote when they turn 18? When you get your driver's license? Should these things be automatic as opposed to not? Listeners, we've got a few more minutes here, and I want to talk about Florida. Florida, once again, will be one of the states to decide this election. And early voting, again, in the state of Florida and across other states, have shattered records. And the same is true this election. But outside of voter suppression, one thing has come out of this that's been very good is the registration of new voters through the social media giants, but also the registration of new voters across the board. Being able to engage in the voting process is one of the greatest things that we have in our country. And everyone should be able to vote, even those who have served their time, not just in the military, but if you made a mistake, you should be able to have your rights restored. But listeners, this is probably one of the most important elections of our lifetime. I know we say it all the time. But this has got to be one of the most important elections of our lifetime, if not the most important. We've got to get out there. We've got to vote. Because this time, our country really depends on it. We've got two extreme sides. One that believes that America should be great again and is not. And one that believes that America is great. So who are you going to vote for? Whoever you vote for, make sure that your voice is heard. Make sure that you listen to the right information and do your own research. And make sure that you understand that what you're doing is helping to set the stage for generations to come. Callers, this is State of the Water. I'm your host, award-winning Dr. Eric Claville, and this has been our Get Out the Vote radio show. Go to the polls on Election Day. Get out there. Take a neighbor with you. Make it a big event. Do whatever you have to do, but make sure you get out there and vote. This is a holiday in the state, and also there's opportunities for you to go out there if you don't have a ride. See you next week.